Imagine a world where 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4. Worse than that, imagine that every time your child adds 2 plus 2, they get a different answer. That's an unnerving and very confusing place to live. In order to provide your young child with a relative safe haven amidst the chaos of the world, you need to behave as consistently as possible regarding your parenting approach. Your child doesn't just expect consistency from you, they need it. How you respond to things is critically important. Flying off the handle one minute and ignoring the same poor behavior the next will only confuse and undermine your parental role in your child's eyes. When raising an ICD adult, an independent, confident, good decision maker, consistency is king. Now, how many times have you seen parents who don't follow through on their warnings? If you do that one more time, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. The child does it one more time and nothing. No punishment follows. I've witnessed that charade so many times, and it saddens me every single time I see it happen. Let me share with you the approach I used, which was extremely effective in raising my son. The most important part of this is consistency. You have to do it every time. No lapses, no excuses. It's consistency that reinforces the lessons you teach your young child. Imagine again if the answer to 2 plus 2 wasn't always 4. How will your child learn that certain behaviors are unacceptable if they get a different result from their parents each time they engage in that particular poor behavior? And when my son was able to confidently walk, we started visiting playgrounds, the zoo, children's museums, all kinds of places. I was a stay-at-home dad. I began taking him to play dates and generally getting out of the house whenever possible. I always had one rule. He gets 2 warnings for any bad behavior. The third time he misbehaves, we go home. Now, as essential as this practice is, and it is essential to helping your child form good habits, it's truly lousy at times, not just for your child, but for you and the people you're with at the time. It's misery to enforce, sometimes it is, but absolutely vital, in my opinion, to raising an ICD adult. Don't underestimate how difficult it is to consistently enforce, but please do everything in your power to do it, and do it consistently. Here's an example for you. One of the many times I had to enforce this rule early on was a visit to the zoo. Fortunately, we're not with anyone else. It was just me and my son. I'd warned him once about running far ahead when we were approaching the entrance. After we got our tickets, he ran ahead to the gate. I reminded him a second time, stay at my side. I assured him we would see all the animals and have a great time. I explained to him that if he runs off again, we would be going home. Once upon entering the zoo, he immediately ran off to the first exhibit. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I walked up to him, lifted him up, and we went home. We had literally been in the zoo for under 2 minutes and the visit was over. I was carrying a crying child and likely most people around us were staring. I didn't care. I was teaching my son a valuable lesson. I was raising an ICD adult. It was not important how much it cost to get into the zoo. Fortunately, I had an annual pass, so it was a little easier to accept leaving after a few minutes. It really didn't matter how long we were both anticipating the visit to the zoo. None of that mattered. Nothing mattered more than teaching my son such an extremely valuable lesson. Rules must be followed. If you have the fortitude to do what I did, I can guarantee you that you will not have to do this too many times before your child figures things out. Now, for a second, I'll jump ahead here. When my son was in middle school, and I spoke to him about one of the most difficult things to teach your child, and that's when not to follow the rules. That conversation was years away, but there are absolutely times when you have to decide you are not going to follow a rule. A young child is not ready to deal with the complexities of determining when to break a rule. For your young child, first comes the necessity to learn to follow the rules. When they're older, you can introduce the much more complex issue of when not to follow the rules. Now, consider this concept from the perspective of, say, an engineer. Engineers have to first learn all the basic concepts of, let's say, designing a building. There are critically important aspects that cannot be ignored if you want your building to stand. The foundation is a factor of the width and the height of the building, the materials used, the ground on which you build the building. All of these factors are necessary to understand when you're designing your building. Engineers need to initially learn and fully understand the basic laws, basic rules of construction. Only after a mastery of these basic concepts can they consider building a twisting, turning, bending building. That can actually be done. Google Dubai skyscrapers. If you've never seen them, you'll be amazed. Anyway, beginner engineers don't start building Dubai skyscrapers. They start with simple designs and get more complex as they build more experience. Your child is the same as the engineer. They first must learn the basic rules of the world in order to establish a clearly understood foundation for how things work. Many parents believe that rules stifle a child's natural creative exploratory tendencies. That's wrong. It's garbage. It's only from a structured, rule-based foundation that a person can truly begin to creatively explore the possibilities beyond those rules. First rules, then creativity. You don't pick up a guitar and start writing songs. You first have to learn notes and chords, basic music theory. After that, maybe you'll compose the next Stairway to Heaven. Now, I don't have the memory I used to have, so I don't recall exactly how many times I had to enforce the 3 times and you're out rule. It was definitely more than once, but it wasn't as many as you might think. Communication and consistency are the key. My son learned rather quickly that I meant what I said. Eventually, our trips out became pure joy for both of us. He learned that bad behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. More importantly, he learned that playing by the rules resulted in good things. Now, I'm not against the carrot and the stick approach, but I prefer the carrot over the stick. Every child is unique. Every parent has to figure out what works best with their children. What's the best carrot? What's the best stick? Ultimately, my wife and I figured out what worked best with our son, and that resulted in my son seeking positive outcomes rather than avoiding negative consequences. It's sort of like seeing the glass as half full, not half empty. Think of people in your life that default to seeking a positive approach rather than avoiding a negative outcome. The people in the world that create, that build, truly contribute to societal progress are positive people by nature. Negativity does not move anything forward. Now, when my son got a little older, a few years after that, he thought he could get around the 3 strikes and you're out rule by being bad in different ways. My son would make an argument like this. He'd say, the first time I ran off when you asked me to stay put, but the second time I threw a rock. Those are different things. So I should get 2 for each. I smiled, no. Maybe a clever argument, but the simple fact is that he knew both behaviors were wrong. 2 strikes and you are out. This is not a courtroom where clever arguments can persuade a jury to let you off. Being a parent means being the judge, the jury, and the jailer. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't teach a 2 or 3-year-old to behave. You can and you should for everyone's sake, especially your child. You are the parent. Your little one needs you to teach them how to navigate the world. A screaming brat having a tantrum is not freedom of expression. It's abuse as far as I'm concerned. I view it as the child abusing their parents with wildly inappropriate behavior, and the parents abusing their child if they allow that type of behavior to go unchecked. Your child needs to be taught that throwing tantrums, or whatever the bad behavior is unacceptable. I'm not advocating yelling or spanking or any kind of physical punishment. There are generally much more effective ways to punish your child when necessary. You've got to figure that out. Explain that a favorite toy, meal, trip, play date, whatever, is at risk. If you don't fold and consistently take away that special something when they misbehave, your child will eventually respond positively when they learn to value the good over the bad. Again, this is not easy. Not letting your daughter go to her best friend's birthday party because she misbehaved is lousy, to put it bluntly. The trick is to begin this approach as early as possible. A 2, 3, or 4-year-old is much easier to teach and generally much more compliant than a 5, 6, or 7-year-old. A lesson learned early is a lesson ingrained in your child's mind. You will never have as much influence over your child as you will when they are very young. Young children look up to their parents in an almost godlike state. This is an incredibly important time to teach them wrong from right, the basics like fair play, sharing, clean up after yourself, listen, ask questions. Now, this list may be familiar to some of you. Read Robert Fulghum's All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. It's a great book, an important one for parents of young children. When I see a victim of the terrible twos, and by victim I don't mean the parents, I mean the child, it's very upsetting. The terrible twos are the result of parents not teaching their young children the basic rules of behavior. On top of that, it's parents that didn't understand the importance of the carrot and stick approach to parenting, and very likely parents that were not consistent when applying discipline to a young child's bad behavior. Good behavior is rewarded. Bad behavior, and your child should lose something that they value. I mentioned in an earlier video that using the ICD parenting approach is actually easy, but unfortunately it's absolutely exhausting. Being consistent with your child is extremely difficult. It is exhausting. Parents are people. They get tired, frustrated, worn out. Sometimes being consistent is just too much to deal with, and they want an easy way out. Parents of young children can lapse in their consistency. My wife and I were far from perfect. We fell down on a job many times, but recognized that being as consistent as possible was in our son's best interest. Raising an independent, confident, good decision maker is absolutely worth the exhausting effort. The end result pays you back with your child growing up to be an adult that is prepared to live her best life. Thanks for listening.